Caitlin Clark was being left off of Team USA, the Olympic team, as a rookie.
We just watched one of the most unique experiences in the history of sports. And I'm talking about the Caitlin Clark experience.
I've never experienced the racial comments from the Indiana Fever fan base.
I've been through so much. I've seen so much. I've been attacked so many times. Death threats. I've been sexualized.
They cannot have fucked this Caitlin Clark thing up any worse if they tried.
Did you feel like that?
Basketball play.
Yeah. Feel like that was the appropriate call or?
It's a basketball play. I can't control the refs. They affected the game obviously a lot tonight. So, can't.
But it didn't look like you were going for it.
I mean, I'm always going for the ball. Like, y'all gonna play that clip 20 times?
To her, but a shot clock violation.
What is happening?
The WNBA found itself in the midst of an uproar when playoff ratings didn't live up to expectations, with much of the buzz pointing to one undeniable fact: Caitlin Clark wasn't there. It was like trying to bake a cake without sugar. Something essential was missing. The league, notorious for its hard-fought battles and immense talent, was left to face a harsh truth. Clark had become a major ingredient for excitement in women's basketball, and without her, things felt a little flat. But before we proceed further, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. This wasn't your average ratings slump, though. The WNBA had been riding a wave of momentum, with fans clamoring for more coverage, more highlights, and more visibility. When the playoff ratings were finally unveiled, though, there was a collective groan across the league. Expectations were sky-high, but the numbers showed a different story. The viewership just wasn't what anyone expected or hoped for, leading to an outcry from fans, commentators, and even the players themselves. What really threw fuel on the fire was the realization that these ratings might have been dramatically different if one player, Caitlin Clark, had been on the court. Clark, with her electrifying three-point shots and her no-fear approach to the game, had become a household name almost overnight. She wasn't just a college star anymore. She was the kind of player that brought people to their feet, someone whose presence demanded attention. Without her, there was a noticeable drop in excitement, and it showed in the numbers. Behind closed doors, the NBA executives were scrambling. They had poured resources into making the playoffs a marquee event, a must-watch spectacle, but the ratings simply didn't reflect that effort. It was like preparing for a massive party only for half the guests to bail at the last minute. There was plenty of talent on display, no doubt about it, but Clark's absence left a gaping hole in the overall energy. Fans, especially those who had tuned in specifically to see her, were disappointed, and that feeling echoed throughout the league. The WNBA players, never ones to back down from a fight, didn't hesitate to voice their frustrations. Some took to social media, venting about the lack of media coverage and the ever-present struggle for recognition. Others felt the sting more personally, knowing that without the extra buzz Clark brings, their hard work was getting overlooked. For some, it was like being in a rock band without the lead guitarist. Things just didn't click the same way. The media, ever eager to latch onto a storyline, was quick to pounce on the situation. Commentators and pundits weighed in, debating how much of an impact one player could really have on a league as competitive as the WNBA. Some argued that this was simply a case of bad timing. Clark's star power had reached a fever pitch at the exact moment she wasn't on the court, leaving fans wanting more of what they couldn't have. Others speculated that the WNBA's marketing strategies were partially to blame, failing to capitalize on the growing momentum of its biggest rising star. But amidst all the finger-pointing and the endless analysis, there was one fact that couldn't be ignored. Caitlin Clark had changed the game. Her influence was undeniable, and her absence was felt in a way that couldn't be explained by mere numbers or statistics. This wasn't just about playoff ratings. It was about what Clark represented for women's basketball. She had the it factor, the kind of charisma that drew people in, whether they were hardcore fans or casual viewers. Her style of play was thrilling, and her personality made her relatable. Without her, the playoffs felt, for lack of a better word, incomplete. As the dust settled, it became clear that the WNBA would need to adjust. The league, which had made significant strides in recent years, would have to figure out how to keep the momentum going without relying on a single player to carry the weight. There was no denying that Clark had brought something special to the table, but relying on her alone was never going to be sustainable in the long run. The WNBA's roster is packed with talent, and the challenge now was to ensure that fans and viewers recognized that with or without Clark in the spotlight. In many ways, this whole debacle highlighted the broader issues that women's sports still face. While progress has been made, there remains a struggle for visibility, for respect, and for the kind of widespread recognition that can make or break a league. The WNBA had made great strides, but this ratings mess showed that there was still work to be done. For too long, women's basketball had been treated as a second-tier sport, even though the players were putting in just as much blood, sweat, and tears as their male counterparts. The situation with Clark was a reminder that the league couldn't afford to let its biggest stars slip through the cracks. As fans and analysts continued to debate what went wrong, the NBA found itself at a crossroads. For years, the league had been slowly but steadily carving out its own space in the sports world, overcoming countless hurdles. The journey had been anything but easy, and while the ratings slump might have seemed like a step back, it also highlighted a reality the league had been grappling with for a long time: how to consistently draw in fans and keep them hooked. This wasn't a simple problem with a quick fix. It was a multifaceted challenge, and the solution would require more than just the hope that Caitlin Clark would step onto the court next season. What the playoff ratings ultimately brought to the forefront was that star power, while incredibly important, couldn't be the only driving force behind a league's success. The WNBA had leaned heavily into its stars in recent years, and to an extent that made sense. Fans gravitate toward players who excite them, who give them something to cheer for, who create moments that stick with them long after the final buzzer. But relying too much on one or two faces to carry the weight of an entire league was risky business. Caitlin Clark's magnetic appeal was a reminder of just how powerful a single player could be in drawing fans, but it was also a warning. The WNBA had to find ways to spread that attention, to build narratives around more players, to create an environment where fans were invested in every game, not just the ones featuring a superstar. There was no shortage of talent across the league, but somehow, that talent wasn't always breaking through in the way it needed to. For years, the WNBA had been working to establish itself as a must-watch league, with efforts spanning everything from marketing campaigns to social media engagement. Yet, there remained a disconnect between the quality of the product on the court and the viewership numbers off of it. The playoff ratings debacle underscored the fact that, even in 2024, women's sports were still fighting an uphill battle for consistent mainstream attention. And as much as the league had grown, it still had some serious work to do if it wanted to close that gap once and for all. One of the major issues was visibility. Despite all the progress that had been made, the WNBA was still struggling to maintain the same level of exposure that men's leagues took for granted. Games were often buried on networks that didn't have the same reach as their male counterparts, and the marketing machine behind the league, while improving, still didn't have the kind of budget that could blanket the sports world with WNBA content. The league stars deserved better, and fans knew it. There was also the question of accessibility. In an era where content is king and fans can watch just about anything at any time, the WNBA was still playing catch-up in terms of making its games easy to find and follow. For casual fans, the challenge of keeping up with the WNBA schedule could be daunting. Unlike the NBA, which has primetime slots on major networks, the WNBA often found itself competing for airtime on channels or streaming services that didn't always make it easy to tune in. It was a logistical issue that many believed had contributed to the league's struggles with viewership. The playoff ratings mess also highlighted a deeper, more philosophical debate about the nature of fandom in women's sports. The harsh truth was that, in some corners, people still viewed women's sports through a different lens than men's. There was a lingering perception, however misguided, that women's basketball wasn't as entertaining or as fast-paced as men's. While anyone who had watched a WNBA game in recent years would vehemently disagree, those old stereotypes still lingered in the minds of some potential viewers. Breaking through that barrier would require more than just great basketball. It would take a concerted effort to shift the narrative surrounding women's sports in general. Caitlin Clark, for her part, had managed to cut through the noise. Her dynamic style of play and larger-than-life presence had drawn in even the most casual observers, many of whom might not have otherwise tuned into a women's game. She was proof that the potential for mass appeal existed in women's basketball, but her absence from the WNBA playoffs left a noticeable void. It wasn't that the other players weren't deserving of the spotlight. It was that the league hadn't quite figured out how to package and promote them in the same way. The tantrum, as some dubbed it, over the ratings was a sign of frustration more than anything else. The players, many of whom had dedicated their lives to perfecting their craft, wanted what any professional athlete would want: respect, recognition, and a platform to showcase their skills to as wide an audience as possible. They had put in the work, they had risen to the occasion time and time again, yet, somehow, they were still fighting to be seen. In some ways, the WNBA situation wasn't unique. Women's sports as a whole had long faced an uphill battle for mainstream acceptance. Whether it was soccer, tennis, or basketball, female athletes were constantly fighting for the attention and resources that their male counterparts often received without question. The playoff ratings fiasco wasn't just a WNBA problem. It was a microcosm of a larger issue in the sports world. But this wasn't to say that the future looked bleak for the WNBA. On the contrary, there were plenty of reasons to be optimistic. The league had made significant strides in recent years, both in terms of its quality of play and its visibility. Ratings might have dipped during the playoffs, but overall, the WNBA was still trending upward. The buzz surrounding players like Clark proved that there was a hungry audience out there, ready to engage with women's basketball on a deeper level. One of the league's biggest assets moving forward would be its ability to build on the momentum created by its stars. Caitlin Clark might have been the headline grabber, but she wasn't the only player with the potential to draw in fans. Names like A'ja Wilson, Breanna Stewart, and Sabrina Ionescu were already making waves, and the league needed to find ways to amplify their voices and personalities. The key would be creating compelling storylines that resonated with viewers, something that would keep fans invested even when a big name like Clark wasn't on the court. The WNBA's challenge wasn't just about filling seats or boosting TV ratings. It was about creating a sustainable fan base that would support the league through thick and thin. This meant engaging with younger fans, who were more likely to grow up watching women's sports as a normal part of their lives, rather than as a novelty. The league had already made strides in this area, with social media playing a major role in connecting players with their fans. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter had become crucial tools for players to build their personal brands, and for the league to engage with a younger, tech-savvy audience. However, building that long-term fan base would also require a commitment from broadcasters, sponsors, and the media. The WNBA couldn't do it all on its own. For too long, women's sports had been relegated to the margins, with broadcasters treating them as an afterthought rather than a priority. If the WNBA was going to reach its full potential, it needed partners who were willing to invest in the league, to put its games in prime slots, and to give it the same kind of promotion that men's sports received. One of the most important takeaways from the playoff ratings mess was the necessity for the WNBA to rethink its marketing strategies. In recent years, the league had made significant strides in getting its players in front of larger audiences, but the playoff numbers show that this approach was still too dependent on a handful of stars. It had worked when Caitlin Clark and other high-profile players were in the spotlight, but the moment they weren't, the excitement seemed to fizzle. The lesson here was clear. The league needed to broaden its marketing focus to highlight the depth of talent across all its teams and ensure that fans remained engaged throughout the season, not just when certain players were on the court. To do that, the WNBA would have to become much more creative in how it showcased its players. It couldn't simply rely on traditional advertising or game broadcasts to carry the weight. Instead, it needed to tap into the same type of narrative-driven marketing that had proven so successful for leagues like the NBA and NFL. Those leagues didn't just sell the game. They sold the personalities, the rivalries, the drama, and the stakes. The WNBA had all those same elements, but it hadn't yet fully capitalized on them in a way that resonated with a broader audience. One example that could provide a template for the WNBA was how the NBA used storytelling to build larger-than-life personas for its players. Over the years, the NBA mastered the art of turning matchups into epic showdowns between superstars, amplifying the drama and creating must-watch TV. The WNBA had all the ingredients to do the same. Rivalries between teams like the Las Vegas Aces and Seattle Storm, or players like Breanna Stewart and A'ja Wilson, had the potential to draw in fans who might not normally watch. The league could benefit from packaging these matchups in a way that made them feel like events, something fans couldn't miss even if they didn't have a particular rooting interest. A major opportunity for the WNBA lay in harnessing the power of social media and digital platforms to drive engagement. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter had already shown they could be game changers when it came to connecting players with fans, particularly younger audiences. The league had already started to build a presence on these platforms, but there was still a lot of untapped potential. For many fans, especially those in the coveted 12 to 30 demographic, Traditional TV wasn't their primary source of sports content anymore. Instead, they were turning to highlights, memes, and behind-the-scenes content on social media. The WNBA could tap into this by encouraging players to be more active online, sharing their personalities and giving fans a reason to invest in their stories. This wasn't to say that the players themselves hadn't already started building their personal brands on these platforms. They had, but the league could do more to help. It could provide support and resources to ensure players were equipped with the tools to engage with their fan bases, amplifying their voices, and making them more visible to those who might not yet be tuning into games. The WNBA could also work to create more content that showcased the personalities behind the players. Reality shows, documentaries, or even YouTube series could provide fans with a deeper connection to the athletes, turning them into household names in the same way that NBA stars like LeBron James or Stephen Curry have become global icons. In addition to social media, streaming platforms offered another avenue for growth. The future of sports broadcasting was already shifting toward digital platforms, and the WNBA needed to stay ahead of that curve. While the league had made strides in streaming its games on platforms like Twitter and Facebook, it still didn't have the same kind of widespread availability that other leagues enjoyed. Ensuring that games were easily accessible to fans, whether through YouTube, Twitch, or dedicated apps, would go a long way toward boosting viewership. Younger fans, in particular, were much more likely to watch games on their phones or tablets than sit down in front of a traditional TV, and the WNBA needed to cater to those habits. One area where the WNBA could take inspiration was the rise of esports. The esports world had exploded in popularity largely because of its accessibility and its ability to create a sense of community among fans. Gamers could stream events on platforms like Twitch, interact with players in real time, and feel like they were part of something bigger. The WNBA could experiment with similar models, creating interactive viewing experiences that allowed fans to engage with the game in new and innovative ways. Imagine watching a WNBA game live while chatting with other fans in real time or voting on the best plays of the game as they happened. Creating this kind of immersive experience could help draw in a new generation of fans who are looking for more than just a traditional broadcast. Beyond marketing and broadcasting strategies, the WNBA's playoff ratings controversy also brought to light another critical issue: the need for more investment. It wasn't just about putting money into better promotions or broadcasting deals, though those were certainly important. It was about building an infrastructure that could support the league's long-term growth. This meant more investment in the players themselves, everything from salaries to facilities to travel arrangements. For the WNBA to reach the next level, it needed to treat its athletes like the elite professionals they were, ensuring that they had everything they needed to perform at their best. One of the biggest challenges facing women's sports, including the WNBA, was the pay disparity compared to men's leagues. While WNBA players had seen some improvements in their salaries in recent years, thanks in part to a new collective bargaining agreement, they were still vastly underpaid compared to their NBA counterparts. This wasn't just an issue of fairness. It was also a barrier to attracting and retaining top talent. If the WNBA wanted to continue growing, it needed to ensure that its players were compensated in a way that reflected their value, both on and off the court. Sponsors would play a crucial role in making this happen. Companies that invested in the WNBA weren't just supporting a sports league, they were aligning themselves with a movement, one that represented equality, empowerment, and opportunity. Brands like Nike, AT&T, and Google had already recognized the potential of partnering with the WNBA, but there was still plenty of room for growth. The league needed to actively seek out more sponsorship deals that would bring in the kind of revenue necessary to support higher salaries and better resources for its players. It wasn't just about making the league more profitable. It was about creating a sustainable ecosystem where players could thrive. The issue of investment also extended to the media. One of the reasons the WNBA struggled with visibility was the lack of consistent media coverage. While things had improved in recent years, with outlets like ESPN and The Athletic dedicating more time and resources to covering the league, the fact remained that women's sports were often treated as an afterthought. Major networks and publications needed to do more than just cover the occasional big game or star player. They needed to treat the WNBA with the same level of respect and attention they gave to men's leagues. This lack of coverage wasn't just a media problem, it was a societal one. Women's sports, for far too long, had been dismissed or ignored, even as they continued to grow in popularity. The WNBA's playoff ratings mess was a stark reminder of how much work still needed to be done to change the way people thought about women's sports. For the league to truly thrive, there needed to be a cultural shift in the way women's sports were perceived, not just by fans, but by the media, sponsors, and the sports world at large. But changing those perceptions wouldn't happen overnight. It would take time, effort, and a concerted push from everyone involved, from the league to the players to the fans themselves. And it would require everyone to continue advocating for the WNBA, to keep pushing for more visibility, more investment, and more respect. The players had already proven they could compete at the highest level. Now it was up to the rest of the sports world to catch up. One of the ways the WNBA could capitalize on its on-court product was by focusing more on innovation within the game itself. While the basics of basketball were, of course, the same for men and women, the WNBA had a unique opportunity to experiment with aspects of the game that could make it even more exciting to watch. For example, the introduction of new rules or even slight modifications to the existing format could add a fresh element to the game that drew in viewers. Things like shortening the shot clock, introducing new three-point incentives, or tweaking the playoff format to make it more competitive could give the WNBA a distinct flavor that separated it from other basketball leagues. Another way to increase fan engagement could be through the integration of advanced statistics and analytics in broadcasts. In the NBA, there had been a growing interest in advanced metrics like player efficiency ratings, true shooting percentages, and defensive win shares, numbers that told a deeper story beyond the traditional box score. By incorporating these kinds of analytics into WNBA broadcasts, the league could appeal to the growing community of data-driven sports fans who were always on the lookout for deeper insights into the game. It would also provide another layer of storytelling, allowing broadcasters to highlight the strategic elements of the game in a way that casual viewers could appreciate. Broadcast innovation aside, the WNBA could also look at its scheduling to improve fan access to games. One of the complaints from fans during the playoffs was the inconvenient timing of some games. Unlike the NBA, which often schedules its most important games during primetime slots, the WNBA had several key matchups relegated to off-peak hours. This limited exposure and prevented the league from capturing the large audiences it needed. By working with broadcasters to secure better time slots, particularly for the playoffs, the WNBA could ensure that its games were more accessible to a wider audience, increasing the likelihood of higher ratings. Another avenue for growth was leveraging the WNBA's existing partnership with the NBA. While the two leagues were closely affiliated, there was still untapped potential in terms of cross-promotion. Many NBA fans were not fully aware of the WNBA's schedule, key matchups, or rising stars. The NBA could do more to promote the women's league, particularly during the off-season when NBA action was slower. Whether it was featuring WNBA highlights during NBA broadcasts or having NBA players publicly endorse and attend WNBA games, this relationship could be used to bring new eyes to the women's game. There was also room for more crossover events between the two leagues. Imagine an NBA-WNBA All-Star Weekend, where players from both leagues could participate in joint events like a co-ed skills challenge or three-point contest. Not only would this generate excitement, but it would also expose NBA fans to the WNBA in a fun and engaging way. Such events could help bridge the gap between the two leagues and demonstrate that basketball talent isn't confined to one gender. While crossover events would help raise the league's profile, the WNBA also needed to double down on growing its own unique identity. As much as the WNBA had benefited from its association with the NBA, it was important that the league carved out its own niche and was not seen as simply the women's version of the men's league. Part of this involved celebrating the unique aspects of women's basketball, things like the emphasis on team play, fundamentals, and strategy that often set WNBA games apart from the more individualistic, high-flying style of the NBA. The league's fans, too, were different from traditional NBA fans in some ways. Women's basketball attracted a passionate, diverse, and dedicated following, including many families, young girls, and women who saw the WNBA as an empowering space. The league needed to continue cultivating this fan base while also working to expand it. Doing so required an understanding of what made WNBA fans unique and how to nurture that sense of community. One of the best ways to build that sense of community was through grassroots engagement. The WNBA had already established a strong presence in local markets, but it could take things a step further by creating more opportunities for fans to interact with players. Community outreach events, youth basketball clinics, and fan appreciation nights could help strengthen the bond between the league and its local supporters. By giving fans the chance to meet their favorite players and become more involved in the game at a grassroots level, the WNBA could foster a deeper sense of loyalty and connection. Schools and colleges also offered a massive untapped market for the WNBA. Women's basketball at the college level was incredibly popular, with stars like Caitlin Clark becoming household names before they even entered the WNBA. The league could do more to create a pipeline between college basketball and the professional ranks, building excitement around top prospects and encouraging fans of the college game to follow those players into the WNBA. Hosting WNBA games on college campuses or partnering with the NCAA to promote the league to college basketball fans could be a great way to capitalize on this existing interest. The international market also represented a huge growth opportunity for the WNBA. Women's basketball was growing rapidly outside the U.S., with countries like China, Spain, and Australia developing top-tier talent and strong fan bases. The league could explore opportunities to hold more exhibition games abroad, similar to what the NBA had done with its Global Games initiative. These international matches would not only expose the WNBA to new audiences, but they could also help create a stronger pipeline of international talent entering the league. The WNBA could also consider expanding its regular season footprint internationally, holding games in major global markets where basketball was already popular. Cities like London, Paris, Tokyo, and Melbourne had vibrant basketball cultures, and hosting WNBA games in these locations could attract a new generation of fans. With the right marketing and partnerships, international expansion could significantly raise the WNBA's global profile and cement its status as the premier destination for women's basketball talent worldwide. At home, the WNBA had to continue building on the momentum of its social justice initiatives. The league had become a powerful voice in the fight for gender equality, racial justice, and LGBTQ+ rights, with many of its players actively involved in activism off the court. This had resonated deeply with fans who valued the league's commitment to social change and saw it as a space where sports and activism could coexist. Continuing to champion these causes would not only solidify the league's reputation as a progressive force in sports, but would also help it attract a broader, socially conscious fan base. However, this commitment to social justice needed to be backed up by tangible actions. The WNBA had already set an example for other leagues in how it handled issues like racial inequality and gender discrimination, but there was always more work to be done. For instance, the league could focus on expanding opportunities for women of color in coaching and front office positions, ensuring that the diversity seen on the court was reflected in the league's leadership as well. Initiatives that supported marginalized communities, both within and outside the sports world, would further align the WNBA with the values of its fans and make it a leader in the sports industry on issues of social justice. While these larger structural changes were essential for the league's growth, there was one thing that couldn't be forgotten: the fan experience. In an era where the competition for attention was fiercer than ever, the WNBA needed to make sure that attending a game was as exciting and memorable as watching it on TV or streaming it online. Enhancing the in-arena experience could be a major differentiator for the league, helping it stand out in an increasingly crowded sports market. This could involve everything from improving the entertainment between quarters to offering more fan-friendly amenities like interactive technology, better food options, and family-friendly activities. The WNBA could also take cues from other sports leagues that had successfully used fan engagement tools like in-game apps, augmented reality, or even VR to create immersive experiences. By making WNBA games feel like events rather than just regular season matchups, the league could give fans more reasons to show up and stay invested. Creating a vibrant and exciting game day experience also meant focusing on the atmosphere inside the arenas. WNBA crowds were already known for being passionate and vocal, but the league could do more to foster that energy. Encouraging more fan interaction, building rivalries, and creating unique traditions for each team could help make WNBA games feel like must-attend events. Teams could also look at offering season ticket packages that provided fans with exclusive experiences, such as behind-the-scenes access or meet and greets with players, to help build long-term loyalty. Speaking of loyalty, the league would also benefit from enhancing its merchandise offerings. While there were already a number of ways for fans to show their support through jerseys and team apparel, the WNBA could expand its merchandise lineup to include more creative, unique products that spoke to its diverse fan base. Limited edition collaborations with fashion brands or even player-designed collections could give fans new ways to connect with the league, while also generating additional revenue. At the heart of all these efforts was the understanding that the WNBA had something special. The league's athletes were among the best in the world, playing a style of basketball that was both exciting and technically sound. But beyond that, the WNBA had built a culture that was about more than just sports. It was a league that championed equality, celebrated diversity, and gave fans something to believe in. This identity was something the league should continue to lean into as it worked to grow and evolve. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more engaging content. We thrive on your feedback, so be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Until next time, keep discovering and stay tuned.